Starting chapter 9, we're going to talk about regression wisdom. So we're going to, again, talk more about residuals a little bit and talk about getting the bends. So linear regression only works for linear models. That sounds obvious, but when you fit a regression, you can't take it for granted. A lot of times data will look like it's linear when it's actually not. So a curved relationship between two variables might not be apparent when looking at the scatter plot alone, but it becomes obvious when you look at the residual plot. Remember, when we plot our residuals, we want to see nothing in the residual plot. No pattern, needs to be random. That's what we're looking for. In the scatter plot of the residuals against the duration of emperor penguin dives holds a surprise. The linear assumption says that we should not see a pattern, but instead there's a bend. So again, we have their duration versus their heart rate, and it appears to be a pretty linear pattern. Doesn't appear to be too much of a curve, but then in our residual plot over here, we can see a clear curve in our residual plot. So this curve indicates that our linear model is not appropriate. So again, you have to make sure that you check your residual plot before you say that you can use your linear model. Even though it means checking the straight enough condition after you find the regression equation, it's good to check your scatter plot of the residuals for bends that you may have overlooked in the original scatter plot. Again, remember, we want the residual plot to be random, so if it is slightly bent, then we cannot use our regression model. Sifting residuals for groups. So no regression analysis is complete without a display of the residuals to check that the linear model is reasonable. You must check your residual plot to make sure that your linear model is appropriate to be used. Residuals often reveal subtleties that were not clear from a plot of the original data. Again, our residual plot will show us if there are some other variables that are having an effect on our relationship and that we need to do something to help get rid of them. Moving on to extrapolation. We use the regression model to make predictions. So we predict a y value for a given x value. Remember that it only goes one way. So what happens if our x value is far away from the x mean? The farther the new x value is from our mean, the less we trust the predicted value, because it starts to get further and further away from our data and from our model. Once we get farther away from the mean, the prediction is called an extrapolation. So extrapolation is when you're trying to make a prediction using an x value that is far away from the rest of your data. So it's outside of the range of your data. That's extrapolation. Extrapolations are troublesome because you don't know how the data may change. So in some cases it might work out. It might be okay to extrapolate the data. However, if we take this example, so according to the U.S. Census, the regression model for the age of first marriage for men, so the age that they were for the first time they got married, against the year from 1890 to 1940 is found by the following equation. If we use this equation to predict the average age of their first marriage in the year 2000, we end up getting 21.3. However, the actual age was 27. So in 2000, on average, men were 27 years old when they were getting married for the first time. According to the model, it was supposed to be 21.3. That's not even close. So in this case, it did not work. When X is years, extrapolations are even more dangerous because you're trying to predict the future. You don't know how things are going to change. You cannot predict the future. In fact, you can't do that. You cannot predict the future. So you have to be careful when you are extrapolating. When you start to get outside of your range on the x-axis, your predictions become less and less trustworthy, and you have to take what they say with a grain of salt. If your x variable is years, you're trying to predict the future, and it becomes even more dangerous. That is all we have for this part of Chapter 9. I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a great night.